Hey guys, welcome to the Brushmaster studio. We're going to be painting this lady today, who is Circe the Black Scavenger from Bite the Bullet Studios. If you like her, I'll stick the link in down here in the description. So go and check it out and check the rest of their minis out, because they're a fabulous company. They've got a great tribe, a great Patreon, and they do some great stuff. She's been painted for the upcoming painting guide for Bite the Bullet Studios. So let's head on over to the workbench and let's see how I painted her. As you can see here, guys, I've primed the miniature. I've sort of done like an underpainting in a very dark sort of violet colour. This is Amethyst Blue from Arcos Hobby. It's very similar to probably Chimera Violet. But I'm using this more and more these days, painting on this very sort of rich coloured sort of underpainting. And it gives me a really nice sort of base to work the other colours up from. Now, a couple of elements you'll notice in this video, guys. I have down in the bottom right hand corner here, I have a list of the colours I use in the whole section. And in the left top corner here, this is my wet palette. It's a bit of a crappy camera, I'm afraid, but I'll get that better over time. So this first layer of skin was a mix of brick red, mahogany brown, and a bit of sunny skin tone. And what I was looking for here is that a real sort of mid-tone here to paint over this purple colour, which I love. And the way I'm painting this, I'm painting it very, very loose. I'm just trying to focus here on where those main parts of light are going to be. Now, I don't concentrate on any blending here at all. The paint is fairly thick. I wouldn't say it's thinned down too much. It's thinned a little bit, but I'm just trying to get a good coverage with this paint. And you'll notice here I'm leaving plenty of the purple showing. The next step here is just to blend that mid-tone into the shadow tone. So I've literally taken some of the original colour, the amethyst blue, and I've mixed a little bit of it in with my mid-tone colour. And I'm just going to carefully here just go in between the two lines, right on the edge of the mid-tone. I've thinned this paint down a little bit more, so it's goes on a little bit smoother. Now for the first highlight, which I'd call a highlight, I've added in a little bit of green sky and a little bit of sunny skin tone. Now the reason I've added the green sky is because although I want this skin to be, alive and vibrant, I want that little bit of a sinister edge to it. So I wanted to add that little bit of a greenish colour to it. So painting the skin on miniatures, guys, is quite often, one of the most daunting and hardest things. It can really make or break a miniature. I found that one of the most important things is, to keep colour in the skin. I always find that helps, and you've seen with the technique here that I'm trying not to overdo the highlights to add too many white colours, which tends to make things look very pasty. And to that point here, guys, I've actually got now the brick red mixed down into a glaze, and I'm literally pushing this brick red from the mid-tone colour into those shadow areas, and I'm just trying to reinforce that little bit of colour, this red tone, just pushing it into the shadow so that there's not that too much of a grey look here. I want there to be that little bit of vibrancy in the whole scheme. On to the clothing now, guys, and I wanted to go a little bit more saturated here, a little bit brighter. So I wanted to get a sort of bluey green colour really going on, which is colours I really love. So I've used my favourite blue, which is Star Blue from AK, and I've mixed quite a bit of pale yellow into that colour. And I'm just painting this on as carefully as I can, trying to leave the purple, the violet as an outline color, as a sort of dark lining. And you'll notice here, when I paint this, I'm leaving brush strokes, deliberately leaving brush strokes on a lot of this part, because I want it to act as like a texture as well. I don't want this to be super smooth. I want it to look a little bit ragged. For the rest of the cloth, I really just added more and more pale yellow. And the blending in between each layer was the same as I showed you as the skin. I just mixed a bit of the previous layer in. And if you haven't done already, guys, please subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up. This really helps the channel to grow. To finish the clothing off, I decided to do a little bit more work in the shadow areas, as some of them looked a little bit large and a little bit plain. So I've gone back to the star blue mix and I've added some of the amethyst blue in to try and add sort of highlight tones to the shadows. Now that that's done, the final step here was to add a glaze. So you can see here on my thumb the consistency of the paint I'm using here for this glaze. You can see it doesn't really leave a lot of paint on, and I dry it off the brush even more when I apply it. Now, the secret to glazing is to get the paint very thin. Always start thinner than you need. You can always add more paint. And then wick nearly all that paint off of the brush. Okay? This is how you're going to get glazing to work best for you. And all I'm literally doing here is I'm brushing both ways. I'm brushing from the lighter tones, the mid-tones to the shadows, and then I'll glaze back the other way, trying to make that paint meet in the middle. And what we get at the end of this, it just homogenizes the colors. So because this is a sort of mid-tone, it's lighter than the dark tones and it's darker than the light tones. It's going to bring those colors together in that in-between transition. As you can see in the video, guys, I'm using quite a unique painting handle. And this is something of my own design, which I've been developing for the last sort of 6 to 12 months now. It's the most comfortable and practical handle I've ever used, and I'm in the process of final design now and actually working with a friend of mine in America to produce these. So keep a lookout in my socials, on my YouTube. The handle is going to be coming up for purchase very soon. On to the wings now, guys. So the first color I'm using here is medium rust from AK, which is a gorgeous color. I actually love using that. And when I'm painting these wings here, I'm putting the first layers on here. And you can see I'm trying to push the paint towards the top of the wings, where most of the light is going to be. Now, I'm not worrying too much about painting individual feathers here. I'm really trying to focus those blocks of light and pushing the color up. And as you can see, as I progress through this, you'll see that I leave a lot of the bottom of the wings still quite violet. And I continually push that paint up towards the top section. For the first main highlight here, I'm using light rust from AK. And again, it's a very similar principle here, where I'm being a little bit more fussy with trying to paint the individual feathers, but I'm still trying to push the light more to the top of the wing. And as you can see, I've got a nice transition there already. So I'm just trying to paint a lesser area this time, but always pushing the paint upwards, getting most of the paint to rest at the top part of the wing. So for the final highlight now, I've added in my trusty pale yellow from AK. I'm trying to get it really light just at the very top section of the wings now, because I want that to be the bit that's more of the focal point of these wings. So we do that in miniature painting by painting things with a higher value or contrasting colours. So here you'll see I'm concentrating very much to the top parts of these wings. Just a quick note on colour theory here, guys. Now, I've tried to use bolder, more saturated colours here because I didn't want to paint her in all very sort of neutral, dowdy colours. Even though she's quite a sinister, sort of a dark edge character, I wanted to put that colour in there. And the two main colours that you're going to, well, three really, is the clothing, the wings, and the hair. Now these are areas that I specifically use my colour wheel for. So if you look at, certainly as the main clothes as a bluey green colour, you can see here on the colour wheel, which hopefully I'll put up here, that the true complement to that colour is a sort of red-orange or an orangey yellow colour, which is what I pushed for on the wings. So for the hair, guys, I wanted to get a colour which would be really nice and sort of brightish and would give her that sort of, you know, kooky sort of look. But also something the bones or the horns would stand out against. So I wanted to get a sort of pinky red, you know, sort of Circe sort of pinky red here. And first colour I'm adding here is brick red. Now, one of the things I found here is when I'd applied this, it was far too sort of browny. So as I move on to the second layer, which is just deep red, you'll see a much more of a reddish tone that I ended up with, which is more than what I wanted really. And the final parts of the hair was really just building up with more and more pale yellow. As you can see, the colour I got at the end was really quite a nice, like I said, a Circe sort of pink colour, which is really what I wanted. And this works well against the surrounding colours as well. Just to say, guys, if you want to see the full footage of this painting process, it'll all be on my Patreon. This is the way I usually paint bones, skulls, horns and things like that, guys. I change my mixes a little bit by adding a little bit of colour to the initial sort of bone sort of base colour. So I use chocolate brown here, but I add a little bit of star blue to that mix, which turns it this sort of, it's like a muddy green colour, which I find just right for bones and skulls. And I add some buff to this as well to lighten it up. So here what I'm doing is I'm painting all the main lights of all these horns and skulls and things, and I'm really concentrating on most of the areas that are facing upwards. To finish these bones off, I just keep adding more and more buff into the mix, guys. I may do a little bit of glazing here and there to smooth things out, but that's really the progression of these bones. And in the end, they come out looking really nice, I think. When I do bases, I take this approach a lot, which you're going to see coming up right now. And that is, I tend to paint the base as a whole first of all, as I try to wet blend colours in so that I can get a colour feel over the whole base and get my nuances of colour where I want them to be. I'll then use this to build my colours up from those underlying colours. And this is very much similar to how you might see Craftworld Studio paint, is I'm really doing an underpainting here and then I'm building up on top. I've had to speed this footage up, guys, because my camera was overheating at the time and it was the footage was really jerky. But you can see here I've got three colours, which are purple, chocolate and medium rust. And all I'm doing here is I've thinned them down a bit and I'm just putting them on with an old brush, and literally I put a couple of colours down, I sort of wipe the brush and then I just go back and blend them together. But when I'm doing it, I'm looking at the areas of colour, of thinking, right, I want a bit more brown here, a bit more orange here, and I just go over and over those colours and build them up. It doesn't have to be a one-hit thing either. You can sort of go back over parts when it's dried and redo it. So for the rocks here, I've added in a little bit of dark green grey with a bit of the purple here, and I'm literally just building up shapes and areas on these rocks, trying to make some lines and some little parts that make it look a bit more rocky. The first layer or two, you know, it always looks a little bit rough, but you're really just defining areas here. And as I progress through, you see I add more green sky to the mix, and I just keep building and building and building. And the last step on when I'm doing any rocks like this or anything really is just some glazing. I literally just add some colourful glazes into darker areas, and then I go back to my lightest tone and I just glaze back up the edge parts and the areas just to smooth things out. Now for the skull, I mixed my chocolate colour in with some of the purple as the first tone. I wanted these bones to look very different to the bones on the character, because these are much more embedded in the ground. So I've used one of the colours I used for the wet blending in the purple. And here you see I really much just block in colour. It's very much a blotchy, stipply sort of technique I'm using here. But I'm focusing on areas. As you can see here, I'm building the lighter tones in the areas where I want the most light to show. And as I progress through here, you can see I'm just adding more and more buff to the mix all the time, getting it lighter and lighter. And in the end, the last pieces I do here is I add some very light glazes all over, which helps to really smooth all these blotchy paint lines and splodges from all over the skull. And the very last step I'll do is once I get it all to the point where I want it, then I'll add some little cuts and scratches and sort of highlight those with a very light colour. I might have even used a little bit of ivory for that as well. But here you can see I'm just smoothing and glazing that colour, which really does wonders, glazing does. Well, there she is, guys. She was great fun to paint, and I love painting Bite the Bullet Studios miniatures. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you can join me next time for another Brushmaster video.